For those of you who take your animals to the veterinarian regularly, this may be pretty basic, but for some of you, I know that you don't always take your pets to the vet, so it's probably important to know some of the things that make it important to do that. First of all, you should be taking your pet for an annual exam, whether it's a dog or a cat, maybe even an exotic pet. And this is important because you always hear about how a dog ages 7 years to every one of our years. And so they're aging fast. They aren't going to be with us forever, as we know, for those of us who have suffered pet loss. And I think it's important to realize that things can change a lot in a year with a pet. So it's important to have them looked at. Also, at those annual visits, they'll help you with things like parasite control, such as prevention of heartworm and roundworms, hookworms, tapeworms, all those various things. They will probably be able to pick up things that you might not have noticed in your home situation, so that's important to know. And also they'll talk to you about vaccinations, and that's what everybody thinks they go to the veterinarian for vaccinations, which is true, but that's not the only reason you should take your pet to the veterinarian. Vaccinations, you will find that different veterinarians believe in giving different vaccines and sometimes have different protocols for those. So it's important that you establish a relationship with a veterinarian that has the same type of philosophy that you have. And if you have any questions about that, you should talk with them. And certainly if for any reason you're not happy, then there are a number of veterinarians and you should be able to choose one that is more aligned with your thoughts. So there are a number of vaccinations that are what we call core vaccinations. And those are ones that probably any veterinarian is going to give to your pet. There may be exceptions to that, so just be aware. But in dogs, the core vaccinations would be for distemper and parvovirus, as well as for rabies, okay? That's really important. And then also, most distemper and parvovirus vaccines also have hepatitis and parainfluenza within that vaccination. So those would definitely be considered core. In certain areas of the United States, it's very important to do other vaccines such as leptospirosis, possibly Lyme vax, depending if you're in an area where Lyme disease is very prevalent. Sometimes there's some others like ringworm vaccine, which isn't as common, Giardia vaccine, which isn't as common. And there is the new disease that's been on the rise called canine influenza. So there are some veterinarians that might recommend that vaccine. And also, if you're taking your pet to board in a kennel or going to daycare, they're probably going to want a kennel caught vaccine, which is called Bordetella, or Bordetella with parainfluenza. So that will become core in an animal that is going to situations where they're exposed to other dogs frequently. Non-core vaccines, like I said, are going to be those things that I just listed that might not be as common or they aren't in every area of the country. They're going to be based on whether or not your pet will be exposed to those types of diseases. With cats, the core vaccines are going to be for the respiratory viruses, which are rhinotracheitis, caleci, and panleukopenia, okay? And those are the ones, panleukopenia in cats is the same as distemper, so that might be confusing, but it actually is a virus that is called distemper, but actually acts very different than distemper in dogs. The other respiratory viruses are very common. The other thing that would be core would also be rabies, just like with the dog. And then the ones that would be considered non-core would be something like feline leukemia, and that's going to be given if your pet or cat is going indoors and outdoors or may be exposed to another cat that has leukemia. Another one is FIV, which is not as commonly given, and FIP, which is also not as commonly given. So there are a few other vaccines I haven't mentioned, but those would be non-core vaccines. Other things that the veterinarian may talk with you about are microchips, and I think those are a great idea. You can have either a dog or a cat microchipped, and that will get your pet back home to you in the event that they are lost or stray. And if they don't have their collar on, then they can be identified and get back to you with that microchip. Most of the shelters in the nation have scanners that they will scan your pet if it's found stray and be able to pick up that microchip. It's very important that you keep the information current on the microchip. So if you move somewhere, then obviously your pet's not going to get back to you unless you call the microchip company and update your information. So that's very important. Of course, spaying or neutering your pet is very important unless you happen to have a purebred that is of good enough quality to be bred. But all pets should be spayed and neutered to help decrease the pet overpopulation problem. Dental care is important, and your veterinarian will be looking at the teeth every year and letting you know if you need to do anything different with home care or if perhaps your pet needs to have a dentistry done. There are certain breeds that are very prone to dental disease, and so it's important to have them checked. Certainly for any sickness that they might be exhibiting, such as vomiting or diarrhea, lethargy, not wanting to eat, those are reasons you would go to the vet. And also emergencies. And it's good to have a relationship with your veterinarian so that you know where to take your pet if there's an emergency. It may be that the office you go to actually sees emergencies, or it may be that they refer to a particular emergency clinic in your area. So it's very important to know what you would do in those cases so you don't just have to flip open the yellow pages and find anybody. You'll be able to find someone that you're comfortable with. An emergency would be a situation where, of course, your pet is injured, maybe a deep wound that's causing bleeding, perhaps something awful like being hit by a car, which would be a real bummer. Dog fights can sometimes lead to fairly severe problems, and certainly any kind of protracted illness like vomiting and diarrhea that's been going on for a while or came on very acutely and the dog is acting really ill. Same with cats. The thing to remember about dogs and cats is they can be very effective at masking the signs of disease. So usually by the time you see a problem with your pet, you oftentimes need to go to the vet, at least call them and see if they would recommend a visit. Certainly anything like seizures, heavy breathing, any of those things would be reasons to go ahead and identify where that emergency clinic is and get your pet there right away.